Welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's your boy Demi and I'm back with yet another video. Today we're going to be talking about shooting your shot. Is it permissible for a woman to shoot your shot? Or for a woman to shoot their shot rather, or whatever. You know what I'm trying to say. Can women shoot their shot? Well, there's a lot of debate about this topic, but you guys, for anyone that follows my channel, I try to teach and explain my perspective from a biblical perspective in as much as it is possible. So the short answer is yes. I do believe that a woman can shoot her shot.
Did I really just forget that melody?
Perfect. It's very important that you watch this video to the end to understand why exactly I am saying that, because my point comes with some important caveats. Okay, so before we go into this video, please share this with somebody, and if you agree with my point, comment. If you disagree, I'll be keen to hear your perspectives. So your support of this channel is much appreciated. Your likes, your shares, keep me motivated to keep making content for this channel. So yes, I do believe that women can shoot their shot, and I need to qualify what I mean by shooting your shot, because I mean that can be interpreted a number of ways. And by shooting your shot, I mean that I believe that it is acceptable for a woman to initiate interest in a man. I do not believe a woman has to be passive. And I think one of the unfortunate things about contemporary Christianity is there are many kind of teachings and ideas that make women feel that they have to be passive in their expectation of a husband. And I feel like so many blessings have been blocked, because a woman can't see a man that she's interested in and feel the need to be active in demonstrating that she's interested in him, or do something intentional about making herself available. And they interpret waiting on the Lord as being passive. But I want to explain biblically and as clearly as I possibly can why I believe a woman can shoot her shot, with some important caveats. So first of all, I think for this conversation, it's very important for me to draw a distinction between morality and wisdom, right? There's the moral question of, can a woman shoot her shot? In other words, is it morally acceptable before God for a woman to shoot her shot? Is she sinning against God or transgressing God's commands, or grieving the heart of God in making the decision to initiate interest in a man? And there's a separate question, although very closely linked, is, okay, even if it is morally acceptable, right, or even if it's morally neutral, in other words, it's not a sin against God to shoot your shot at a man, is it wise? Is it a good idea? Because there are many things in the area of relationships that may be permissible but not wise, or maybe wise in the imagination or the ideas of men by human standards but aren't biblical. So we need to qualify that. Is this morally acceptable, and is this a wise thing to do? Is this a good idea even if I can do it? So let's begin with the moral perspective. Is it morally acceptable for a woman to shoot her shot at a man? Can a woman initiate interest? And based on scripture, I would say yes. There is no biblical warnings or rebukes or discouragements about a woman initiating interest in a man. There are no biblical accounts of a woman approaching a man or initiating interest in a man that would illustrate that it angered or grieved God, or this was something that God was frustrated about. There just simply isn't nothing in the Bible that discourages or rebukes the idea that a woman can initiate interest in a man. And if somebody feels otherwise, I'd be keen to see your response. But I anticipate that the common verse people typically go to is Proverbs chapter 18 verses 22, where it says that a man who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. But here's the problem with using that verse. One, Proverbs 18 verse 22 is not a command. I mean, a command, as an example, is to love the Lord your God, to love your neighbor, to not make any graven images, to not covet your neighbor's possessions. These are biblical commands. To transgress these commands would be sin. And we see various biblical accounts and examples of people transgressing God's commands transgressing the command to love God, transgressing the command to love your neighbor. And we see various commentaries of God rebuking them, of God punishing them, various biblical admonishments to love the Lord your God, to love your neighbor. You know, the person that says that they love God and doesn't love their neighbor is a liar. So there's clear biblical instructions around God's commands. I mean, the Proverbs 18:22 is not a command. It's an observation. I mean, Solomon simply makes the observation that a man who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. It's an observation. It's not a command. And also, another important thing about Proverbs 18:22 is that it's not a gender-specific verse. What do I mean by this? I mean that Proverbs 18:22 is just as valid if you were to replace a man with a woman. A woman who finds a husband finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. I mean, it's just as true for the woman as it is for the man. Now, there are many verses in the scripture that are gender specific, that are specifically tailored to the man, that are specifically tailored to the woman. But Proverbs 18:22 is not one of those verses. It's important to consider that most of scripture is written from the male perspective and in male language. I mean, let's look at Proverbs chapter 18 verses 16. I mean, another verse from the same book. A man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. I mean, is that a verse that only applies to men? Of course not. I mean, it's just as relevant to the man as it is to the woman, but it's written in male language. Another important hermeneutic principle is consistency of commentary. It's very, very dangerous to use one verse in the Bible to argue a particular perspective. It's very helpful when you have multiple verses and commentaries across scripture and accounts that help you define a doctrinal stance, especially one as significant as the idea that a woman should not approach a man. So if you're going to make a statement that has implications for a person's life, it's very, very dangerous to base it on one verse in the Bible, because that verse can be interpreted in a number of different ways. And I'm interpreting it and making the statement that Proverbs 18:22 is not a command. It's not defining the way in which a man is to meet a woman. It simply isn't. And it's not a gender-specific verse. So I want to conclude that point by saying that there isn't any biblical instructions that specifically address the idea that a woman cannot initiate interest in a man. And actually, I think about the account of Ruth, you know, where she, was at the feet of Boaz. She initiated interest. I mean, and God worked that out for the good. I mean, there's nothing to indicate in that account that what she did was rebellious or a sin in the sight of God. And that, in my estimation, was a form of initiating interest. So, morally speaking, it isn't a sin. It's not an offense against God. God is not burning in anger against any woman that has expressed interest in a guy. And typically when people make the argument that it is a sinful thing, they make an argument from culture or from human reasoning. You will never hear someone argue this perspective using scripture. And even when they do use scripture, they use it in a way that's not consistent with the context or doesn't honor the point that the author's making. You cannot make a biblical argument for the idea that a woman cannot initiate interest in a man. You simply can't. And I would love to see somebody try. I've researched and I found that everyone that's articulated this response, based on what I've seen, has done so using verses that don't even honor the context of what the author is talking about. Okay, but you need to follow me with this. We've covered, okay, it's not morally wrong. It's not morally an offensive thing to do against God. But there's also a question of wisdom, right? Now, where there are very clear biblical commands and instructions are in regards to marriage. Now, the Bible is very clear that the head of the woman is the man and the head of the man is Christ in marriage. The Bible is very clear that a woman is to be submitted to her husband in marriage, right? So whilst the woman doesn't have a moral obligation in regards to initiating prior to marriage, she has a very clear obligation to submission in marriage. So how do we reconcile the obligation before marriage to the obligation in marriage? Now, this is where it goes on to the question of, is it wise? And this is my personal interpretation of scripture. Whilst I do not believe that it is wrong for a woman to initiate interest, I do believe it is dangerous once that interest has been established. In other words, once the guy knows that you are interested, for him not to take the lead, right? If the woman establishes interest and she is then pursuing the guy, reminding the guy that she's interested, or the guy is kind of half-hearted and she's leading the initiative on the dates, she's leading the initiative on the idea of marriage, she's leading the initiative on what the household will look like, there is a skewing of the biblical order of things. In other words, when a person meets another person in the context of dating or courtship or whatever label you want to apply to it, their journey should be a preparation for the biblical order that God has prepared for them in the context of marriage. So whilst a woman before marriage is under no obligation to be submitted to a man, understanding that once in marriage there will be a relationship of leadership and submission, the journey towards marriage should honor that. So, in my personal interpretation, whilst I do believe a woman can initiate interest, I believe that once that interest has been received and noted, or once it's been established that, okay, the woman is feeling the guy is feeling the woman, then there should, in wisdom, be a shift towards the guy leading and providing direction and covering, in a sense, for the relationship. I think it is very dangerous when a woman expresses interest in the guy and the guy is half-hearted about it, or the guy doesn't reciprocate the interest and the woman is pursuing the guy still and she is trying to push and make things happen. That's when the order of things becomes a bit confused. So express interest, but once that interest has been received, once it's been noted by both parties, there is a clear danger that if the man does not take decisive leadership responsibility prior to marriage, there will be a conflation of responsibilities and a confusion and a disorder in marriage. And I can even imagine in a relationship, would you want to date a guy that's indecisive about whether he wants to be with you, that's indecisive about, marriage, that's indecisive about all the things that as a man he should be obligated to do? And I'll say, well, you can if you want to. I mean, you can marry anyone you want to, but I think in wisdom, and it's very important, it's not a matter of biblical command, that you date a guy that is very clear and he assumes his leadership responsibility from the moment it has been established that there is a mutual interest between you. But I have to bear in mind that what I'm saying is from wisdom. I think it's wise, once interest has been established between the two, that the man assumes leadership responsibility. Either by saying, look, darling, I'm not interested in you, or either by saying, I am interested in you, and kind of assuming that leadership role. You shouldn't have to be the one driving all the dates, driving marriage, driving the vision for your relationship. I think the man should, it's not obviously the man's responsibility alone, right? I mean, I think it's a collaborative agreement and discussion between the man and the woman, but you should see the man begin to take a decisive leadership role in preparation for the biblical design of the man and the woman in the context of marriage. So that formal leadership submission relationship hasn't yet been established, but the journey to there should be a preparation for that. I mean, what you don't want to do is have the woman leading the man to marriage and then trying to flip that on the day you get married. The woman saying to the guy, okay, I've led up until this point, now you be the leader. I don't think it's going to work like that way. So just to re-emphasize, morally, I don't think it's wrong for a woman to initiate. I don't think it's wrong for a woman to shoot her shot. I don't think it's a moral issue. But in wisdom, once that interest has been established, once that guy does know that you are interested, it's really on him to be decisive, to be intentional, and to provide leadership to the relationship. And I think you'll get yourself in a lot of heartbreak, a lot of tears, if you're pursuing a man who knows you're interested, but is half-hearted or indifferent, or doesn't respond in the way that I think a man should do in the view to marry a woman. Another perspective I want to make from the point of wisdom. Again, I remember I've made a clear distinction between wisdom and morality. Wisdom is based on more interpretations of scripture and what I think honors God. Morality is based on what you can and can't do based on the explicit laws of God, the commands of God clearly articulated in scripture. I don't believe it's morally wrong for a woman to initiate her shot. But then there's another question of, I don't believe it's morally wrong for a woman to shoot her shot. But there's a question of wisdom in relation also to culture. Right, so we live in a culture where it is not culturally normal for a woman to shoot her shot at a man. In other words, it's not culturally the normal thing, even amongst people that don't believe in God, for a woman to to initiate interest in a man. That the cultural normal pattern, even for Christians and non-Christians, is for a man to shoot their shot. So we know that as believers, we're not under obligation to follow the patterns of culture, but we can't be ignorant to them. In other words, you can, it's permissible, but in the cultural context where it is not culturally normal for a woman to shoot her shot for a man, you have to understand that even if you do something, you are going to be met with frustration. Does that make sense? It's like, let me give an analogy. You can wear your clothes inside out. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing morally there's nothing morally like wrong with wearing your clothes inside out. But you have to understand, we live in a culture that everyone wears their clothes the normal way. You know, they don't wear their clothes inside out. So although you can do it, you can't be surprised if you're met with frustration, with comments, and with people saying, you know, snide remarks at the fact that you're wearing your clothes inside out. So, you know, in my personal experience, and again, I'm trying to qualify that this is a personal thing, I typically would rather want to approach a woman rather than have a woman approach me, personally, because that's the way I've been raised, that's the way I've understood things as being normal. I wouldn't personally be as receptive to the advances of a woman as I would like to make an advance to a woman. Like, if I think for me and for many guys, if I like a woman, I will make my interest known. So I don't think a woman has to initiate interest in me, you know. I mean, you can make yourself available if I'm not aware of you and that kind of thing. I mean, you can do that with a guy. Like, if a guy isn't aware of you, like he doesn't know you on social media, he doesn't know you in the church, like you can introduce yourself to the guy, but culturally speaking, it's not normal for a woman to initiate interest. Like, tell a guy that she likes him or she's feeling him if he hasn't first done it. So, although I do believe it is morally fine, I don't think it's an offense against God. There's a question of, is it a good idea given the cultural context in which we live in? There may be other countries around the world where it's normal for women to shoot their shot and it's culturally acceptable there. But you have to ask yourself a question, and this is very much a personal decision. It's a personal choice. Do I want to initiate interest in a man in a cultural context where it's not culturally normal to do so? And if you feel like, yes, I want to, then you know, God bless you. You know, feel free to do it. I just wanted to bring to your understanding that, you know, it kind of affects your success rate. It affects how people perceive you. But if you don't care about that, then go for it. You know, I've heard of people, married women that, you know, gave their number to a guy and they're married today. It's worked for them. Do you know what I mean? It's not the normal pattern of things. It doesn't happen every day, but it can happen. So if you feel personally that, you know, you want to shoot your shot at a guy, you want to initiate interest, then, you know, by all means go for it. I don't think morally you are transgressing God's commands. I don't think morally you're doing anything that would be detestable in the eyes of God. I think the only two things I would caveat is just be conscious that as a woman in God's design, there is a clear structure of submission and leadership. And in initiating interest in the guy, it's very important, in my personal opinion, that once that interest has been established, that you prepare for the God ordained design for you and your husband in marriage, right? A woman that is leading a man into marriage may cause some kind of confusion or frustration or tension or disorder once you are married. Do you know what I mean? I think once the interest has been established, once you both know that there is something that's going on here, man, please take the lead. Man, please, you know, be the man that God has called you to be and preparing for that God ordained design in marriage. And finally, another thing for me to say is that although I do believe it's permissible, it's not sinful to shoot your shot at a man. Understand that you're in a culture where it is not normal. You don't have to be defined by culture. You don't have to obey what the culture does. But I think understanding the cultural context you are in is helpful in navigating, you know, all of these various challenges. So, you know, that's my personal opinion. I'd be keen to understand your thoughts. Did what I say make sense? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? What are your personal experiences? Feel free to comment, and I'll try my best to reply to all of your thoughts. But on that note, until the next time, deuces.